I figure a lot of people are going to ask this, but the reason I don't run something like Omni-Oculus or Graviton Forfeit is because both of those exotics are literally F tier. Yo, what's going on, guys? It's G Miners here. I just uploaded the 3 best Warlock builds that you should be bringing into Lightfall and asked which class you guys wanted to see builds for next, and most of you wanted Hunter builds. I will more than likely be running Hunter during the raid race myself, so in this video, I'm going to be going over the 3 builds that my team will be using in the new raid. I also saw a lot of comments asking about other exotics to use and other builds that could be just as strong in that Warlock video. So in this video, I'm going to also spend some more time going over why the builds I have here are the ones we're using and why they're better overall compared to some other builds that currently exist. As always, if you guys do enjoy the video and haven't already, make sure to drop a like and sub down below. We're only 400 subs off of 55k. Starting things off, we have an Orpheus Rigs Hunter build, which can also easily work with Gerfalcon's Hauberk. This is going to be the main reason that you want Hunters in your team comp for the new Lightfall raid. With a nerf to Divinity, having some Hunters who can throw down a 30% debuff is going to be the best overall option that we currently have. The reason that I usually run O-Rigs is going to be for the amount of super energy that you can get back, especially during encounters where we might be having a metric ton of adds to deal with. Something like Descent and DSC is a perfect example of this. Being able to suppress enemies and then clear them extremely fast while also getting over half your super back is one of the best things to have in the entire game. On the other hand, in situations where you might be in a longer encounter with pretty manageable adds to clear, then I think Gerfalcon's is gonna be better. I don't think the volatile rounds are the most OP thing in the world, but it's super nice to pop in and out of invis between kills, and I do also think this makes getting multiple kills with void weapons much easier, which will also allow us to pair this with something like Harmonic Siphon and utilize Devour on this subclass. Especially with an Orb Generation meta next season, Devour on all void classes is going to be extremely strong. I have the full build that I use for both Orpheus Rigs and Gerfalcon's on screen now. I usually just tend to rock Stylus Executioner for the extra fragment slot, but if you guys did want to swap this out when using O-Rigs, you can. I figure a lot of people are going to ask this, but the reason I don't run something like Omni-Oculus or Graviton Forfeit is because both of those exotics are literally F tier. Running Infinite Invis, in my opinion, on something like Graviton is a bad crutch to use because while you hide, it means your teammates then take extra aggro from adds avoiding you. And then in the case of Omni-Oculus, the only time the 50% damage resist comes into play is when you're Invis, which is when 0 enemies are shooting you. These exotics might be solid for something like a GM, but they shouldn't be used in a day 1 setting, in my opinion. After Void, I think Solar also has extremely good potential. In situations where we might be running Divinity as our only debuff and need shorter burst damage against bosses, then a Solar Hunter on Blade Barrage or even Golden Gun is the next best thing to have. And if you do want these supers, then Star Eater scales are going to maximize damage. I do also think that running Young Ahamkara's Spine could be great. In a situation where you're burning through ammo, using the full trip mine rotation could be extremely useful against a boss. It won't ever compete with heavy weapons, but it would be similar to how strong fusion grenades currently are because you can spam these infinitely. The nice part about Star Eaters is if they don't get changed, that a Well of Radiance and then 1 other orb from any source will get you ×4 Feast of Light, which means you could easily swap 2 Star Eaters before a damage phase and then immediately swap back. Running something like Healing Grenade on Solar with Ember of Empyrean, Ember of Torches, and a Solar Weapon gives you roaming healing and a roaming 25% damage buff. So as far as the mid game of this build is concerned on Solar, all of this stacking also makes it pretty hard to die if you choose to go that route with the build. The full build, once again, can be seen on screen now. This is the standard subclass setup most players are going to be using. Obviously, there will be some deviance. Marksman versus Gambler's Dodge comes down to the encounter you're in, and then something like Ember of Beams is obviously only going to be useful on Blade Barrage. I will also say that Assassin's Cowl, as it stands, can be a pretty good option for Solar as well. The Phantom Knives are pretty solid even in endgame content. You can still get kills on trash ads while -20, so the healing from this and finishers with the invis you get will be nice too. Overall, the main reason to use Solar is going to be for boss damage if you don't need Tether, but if you do choose to run Solar for the mid game, this is another solid option. Last up, we are moving on to the Arc subclass. Only 1 player on your team should be running this, in my opinion, for a boss phase, but for normal encounters, having multiple players on this is fine. Gathering Storm is going to be the highest damaging super in the game when paired with Star Eater scales. The issue is that only one player will be hitting for max damage and other players will be dealing less damage. This will pretty much be the exact same setup as the Solar subclass, but the nice part is that you do also have Combination Blow here as well. So if you manage to get this stacked up, you can use this for some ad clear, and just like before, if you did want to switch to Star Eaters right before a damage phase, this would open up the option to run something like Assassin's Cowl too. For non-boss encounters, I think that this build is decent and could be used effectively. The main issue that I see with the build is that in a lot of cases, the jolt from your dodge will kill enemies, which won't trigger Combination Blow, and getting this stacked up while in contest mode will be hard. I've used this a ton for GMs and even GM speedruns, especially last season. The build is amazing, but we would reset a bunch when one or two things eventually went wrong, which means that would likely cause a death in a raid setting. Obviously, 1-2 punch did get nerfed as well, so this build isn't going to one-shot champions, but for most ad clear, it will still be super effective. The full subclass layout is also going to be on screen right now. I personally don't choose to run Spark of Feedback with the build, but that would be another good way to increase damage by 75%. But because of the invis from Assassin's Cowl, this won't come into play too much. And even when running Star Eaters, the build usually is going to look the same way, maybe with the exception of having Marksman Dodge on instead. Overall, I really think that for simplicity in normal encounters and for boss encounters, that Void is gonna be the play, especially with Devour being easier to proc than ever before next season and with the div changes. Solar, as I mentioned, will likely be what I run if we need burst DPS, or for whatever reason Tether isn't being used. And then Arc is something that I doubt I will use, but it might be useful in the right encounter. I don't think Stasis Hunter is really that strong of a build to take into endgame content, and as for Strand is concerned, the super looks to be heavily based in ad clear, and other than Woven Mail, there isn't anything that looks too broken in terms of the subclass's survivability. Let me know your thoughts on the builds I covered in the comments below, and I do also stream a bunch over on my Twitch where we do lowmans and speedruns live, and I will also be streaming the day 1 raid race. A link to that and my Discord server are both going to be in the description below if you want to check them out. Anyways, that's all for this video. As always, have a good one, guys. Peace.